If an emergency happened tomorrow, is your family ready? This can be an unnerving question. It can bring on a lot of stress, a lot of overwhelm, but here's what I would just have to say. It doesn't have to. Getting prepared does not mean you need to go down the doom and gloom path. It does not mean you need to go buy a bunker or store a bunch of firearms. It just means you need to take concrete actions. And the great news is you can get ready for a 72-hour emergency in 48 hours. Welcome back to Preparedness. I am Laura. We talk about all things prepping and self-sufficiency. I am glad you are here because today we are really breaking down what I feel like can sometimes be an overwhelming task, and that is preparing for that foundational emergency, a 72-hour emergency. It is kind of the basics of where we start. And I love thinking about this in terms of a simple planning process. So for those of you who don't know, I was in the military. I had lots of years of doing planning and figuring out how we were going to win the next war. And so in the military, we have a planning process, and it is really structured to help you figure out that end state. What does success look like? And then how do you break that down so that it is achievable and it is not completely overwhelming? Now, in the military community, you might hear that we plan really well, but we don't always execute, and I can't really argue with that necessarily, but the planning process itself is super solid. And so I'm going to introduce a framework today for you to think about how to break down prepping so that it is not overwhelming. Because the most common complaint I hear is, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know where to start. And if that sounds like you, don't stress, because we're just going to break this down very simply. For this particular video, our end state is really based on the time that we want to be prepared for. And I think this is a very useful way for thinking about your prepping, because the reality is most of us are preparing for an emergency that lasts a particular amount of time, whether that is 72 hours, 1 week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 90 days, or longer, right? Where we are really preparing for what I'll just call a catastrophic event, societal collapse, whatever you want to call it. Today, we want to really focus on a 72-hour end state. And all that means is our end state is that we want to be ready for any type of 3-day emergency. And that, again, is the absolute minimum that most of our emergency kind of response agencies recommend, whether that is FEMA or Red Cross or just the government in general, will tell you you need to be ready to provide for yourself and your family for at least 72 hours, because in an emergency situation, it may take a while for emergency responders to be able to get access to your home. And you really could be left on your own to fend for yourselves and fend for your family. And so what we want to do is set up really clear kind of systems to make that achievable. In military planning, we call these kind of things lines of effort. And so what I want you to just think about this is kind of categories or bins, your lines of effort, right? And the most common ones that I tend to teach, because I really believe that it gets you ready for most emergencies, are water, food, household supplies, medical supplies, financial preparedness, and then just communication. Now, built into all of these things are the skills you're going to want to develop along those lines. And as you talk about building out for a longer term emergency, those skills are going to also start being important. But if you just think about your prepping in terms of kind of categories, it can really break down what sometimes can feel really overwhelming into a simple process. So today, we're just going to talk about the 6 categories that you need to be prepping for, and then how you do that over a weekend so that at the end of that 48-hour weekend, you are prepared for emergencies. All right, so it's Saturday morning, you just woke up and you are ready to start your prepping journey. We are going to start with water. Now, you can complicate this as much as you want, but the simple calculation is the number of gallons you need per person in your family times the number of days you are preparing for. So in this case, we would say the number of gallons of water, I recommend at least 3 per person in your family. That means if it's you and your spouse and 2 kids, that's 4 of you that you're going to want to multiply by, times a 72-hour emergency, or 3 days. That is going to give you the number of gallons of water you need to store, which in this case is 36 if I did my rough mental math right. And so you're going to want to think about how to store 36 gallons of water. Now, the most straightforward way that I absolutely recommend everybody start is go out and buy some cases of water for your family. This is the most basic prep that you can do. Or if you have some room to store it, it. You can use gallon containers as well. The reason that I start with this is because it's easy to move, it's easy to access. Cases of water stack really well. And so what I want you to do Saturday morning is go out to the grocery store and figure out how many cases of water you need to store for your family. It doesn't need to be complicated. Just buy some of those cases and get going. All right, so if you are a family of 4 and you are looking at cases of water, that is going to be 10 or 12 cases of water, depending on kind of how you want to do the math on the number of gallons. I know that can seem like a lot, but if you just stack it 5 high side by side, that takes up a relatively small amount of space. I start here because it's just the most basic. It's not the only way to do it, but it is the simplest way to do it. So don't make it complicated. Go buy some cases of water, put them in your basement, put them in your garage, put them on the bottom of some closets. You will have water for an emergency situation. But before you rush off to the store, let's talk about number 2 really quickly, and that is storing food that your family will eat that is shelf stable. Again, the most basics you can think about for this are things like peanut butter and jelly, granola bars, ramen noodles, things that you can make relatively quickly with nothing more than boiling water. Again, we want to keep this really simple so that we are not making a barrier to getting ready. Yes, you can stock stuff to make gourmet meals. Yes, I love packing up camping meals because I think they're a great fast food option. And if you watch my Build Your 72-Hour Emergency Kit, you will see some alternatives to that for food. But when you are just thinking about keeping your family safe, think about crackers, think about nuts, granola bars, again, trail mix, things like that that are easy to store, that won't go bad very quickly, that your family already likes to eat. The reason I'm asking you to keep this super basic is because when we go down this rabbit hole of thinking about the kind of food we could cook or where we're going to cook, it can get overwhelming. It can really immobilize people. And so what the purpose of this video is just to, no kidding, get you prepared for the worst case scenario. This is not what you would live on if you were planning for a week or 2 weeks or 30 days or longer. This is what you need to survive for 72 hours until emergency help gets there and you can go and get to someplace safe where you have access to all of the normal amenities that you are used to in your day-to-day life. The third category is just household supplies. So think of things, toilet paper, trash bags, paper towels, cleaning wipes, things like that. It's the stuff that you would want to have on hand to help clean up after an emergency situation or to help keep your house dry if you have experienced a storm. So a few other good ideas are storing plastic rolls, some tarps, some duct tape. Again, think about basics. We don't want to go too deep here. We want to be really high level. What, no kidding, would keep your family dry and warm for 72 hours. You're also going to want to include a manual can opener because for those of you with electric can openers, if the power goes out and you have stocked that canned soup, if you can't open it, it is not going to do you any good. So make sure that you have a manual can opener in your emergency supplies. All right, so that is your Saturday. You have stocked water, you have stocked your food, and you have stocked your household supplies. That is probably one trip to Sam's or Costco or Walmart, and you can get, I would say, 80-85% of what you need to survive an emergency situation. If you're thinking about your cooking and you want to be a little extra safe, go fill up your propane tank on your grill because you probably have one sitting in your backyard and you can use that to cook in an emergency situation. And so that just gives you an extra source of fuel so that you can heat that soup up and you don't need to eat it cold. All right, you are ahead of probably 90% of the population if you just take those steps on Saturday. Now, go to sleep, get some rest, and then you come back on Sunday ready to go with a couple of the other categories that I think are really important, but that sometimes we don't talk about in the prepping space quite as much as we should. The fourth category is just medical supplies. So again, on Sunday, as you wake up, I really want you to think about gathering all of your medical supplies in one location. Chances are you already have Band-Aids, you already probably have some rubbing alcohol, maybe some hydrogen peroxide, maybe some leftover tape from some sort of injury a long time ago. Put all of those supplies together and think about what you need to respond to what I'm going to call a boo-boo kit scenario, okay? Think about that as a small cut, a laceration, a contusion, meaning I got bruised doing something. These are the kinds of things that you are going to want to prepare for. I have a whole video series on medical supplies and what you should do if you are trying to get ready for a long-term emergency. But again, think about this as really that first layer of defense. So stock up on some over-the-counter medicine, stock up on some allergy meds, get yourself some bandages, some gauze pads, maybe some cold packs so that you can treat an injury if you have a bruise. Think about things to clean wounds and to keep them sterile. Keep it basic. If you're really desperate, go buy a over-the-counter first aid kit, although I really hate recommending them because they typically don't have kind of the right mix of things in them. But if you're just overwhelmed, go buy one of those big medical kits that is big enough for your family, and know that you, again, are going to be ready for most boo-boo type scenarios. And that is really what you're looking for in that first 72 hours. The fifth one is something that you maybe not think about when you're out getting those medical supplies. Run by your ATM and get some cash. When you're buying those medical supplies, pay with cash so that you can get some change, or run by your bank and get some denominations that are small. So think about some 5s, some 10s, some 20s. The reason you're going to want that cash is that in an emergency situation, let's say the power goes out, but people still have kind of supplies to barter with or sell, or you can go down to the local store, and if you have cash, you can pick up those last few items that maybe you forgot about. Having small denomination bills is incredibly important. This is also going to help you with prepping long-term down the road. Get all of your banking information together. So all of your bank accounts, recent bank statement, contact information for maybe your credit card companies, your insurance companies. This is a great time to just make sure that your financial house is in order and that you have the contact information that you would need to get in touch with your insurance, your bank, etc. I lump this all into financial, and really, I guess it's a little bit bigger kind of in terms of your emergency binder documents, of those critical paperwork things. But this is just those things that you would need to make sure that you are, again, ready for a quick emergency. Again, start small, don't overwhelm yourself. When you are ready to make that big leap, go check out my emergency binder video where we talk about really how to build out that emergency binder with every important document that you might need in an emergency situation. It's a great thing to just grab and go. If you have time on Sunday, go ahead and build one, but those can take a couple of days, which is why I'm not telling you to do it in this weekend prep video, because again, we are trying to keep it high level, foundational, so that you can make progress and feel more secure on Monday morning. The last one is just communication. Again, this one is pretty basic. The first thing that we forget is that we live by our cell phones these days. All of the important numbers are in there. All of the numbers for our doctors are probably in there. I want you to make a paper list of emergency contact numbers. That is family that you would need to notify in an emergency situation, medical staff that you think you might need to contact, any sort of emergency number that you can think of that you would want to have readily available. Your local fire department, your police department, maybe the local animal shelter, to make sure that if a pet is missing, you know how to find them. You want to get all those numbers actually in writing, because again, in a weather emergency, in an emergency situation where you may not have access to the normal Googling of things, you are just going to want to have that information at your fingertips. Again, that can be combined with that emergency binder plan, but this is just to get it really quickly down on paper. Provide a list of those numbers to your kids so that if they are separated from you in an emergency situation, whatever adult they are with knows who to call. Put your information in there so that they know how to get in touch with you if there is a situation where maybe you are separated from your kids when something bad happens. And I would just encourage you to order an emergency radio. So hop on Amazon on Sunday, order your emergency radio. If you live in a suburban setting, you will probably have it in 24 hours. If you're like me and you live out in the country, you will at least get it in the next 3 to 4 days. And that can go a long way in keeping you up to date with what is going on in a weather situation. Because again, just like we learned in our tornado scare a few months ago, when the power goes out, sometimes it can be hard to get that local information if you don't have a backup communications plan. Having an emergency radio is just foundational to making sure you are prepared for an emergency. That's it. If you do just those 6 steps, you are going to feel so much more confident. You are going to be ready for an emergency. Again, it's a very basic introduction. This is not for those of you who are further down the prepping rabbit hole. This is for my newbies who are really just getting into this idea that, oh my gosh, like I need to be ready if there is a flood, a fire, all of the things that we have seen over the last 6 months that have hit the United States. This is just to prep you for that 72-hour emergency so that you know you are ready. So if you did all of that in a weekend, you would be more prepared than 90% of the population. And if you're ready to go just one step further, I would encourage you to check out Build My 72-Hour Emergency Kit video, where we really talk about building out emergency supplies that are maybe a little bit slightly more advanced than what I covered in this video, but still designed to get you through just a short-term emergency. If you think about your prepping in terms of your end state being how long you want to be prepared, and your lines of effort in terms of kind of those categories: water, food, household supplies, medical, finances, communication, etc., you are going to be able to break down your emergency preparedness journey in a way that feels sustainable and also is not overwhelming. And that is what we're trying to do in this video. Thanks so much for joining. If you have any questions, just drop a comment below. I would love to hear what you are feeling stuck with so that I can create some more content to help you on this prepping journey. Thanks so much for being here.